Okay.
All right. So it started off about an hour ago. Yeah, exactly an hour ago. So we got reports of explosions in Iran. Immediately, all of us assumed it's wave three of the American attacks. Iranian media was reporting explosions and strikes in Shabahar, Bandar Abbas, Konarak, Ahvaz, Bushir. So the same places that were struck the last two times. So everyone immediately assumed it was the Americans on the third round of strikes, the third wave. Also Kashim, Sirik, Jask, all the same places. And then Axios put out a report saying, no, the US is not striking Iran. So everyone's like, all right, that must be Israel. But usually if it's Israel, you'd see the cruise missiles like we saw before. You'd get OSINT reporting the fighter jets, the Israeli fighter jets. And then you got Israeli media saying it's not Israel. So then who's left? It's the Gulf. It's not going to be the UAE. It won't be them because they weren't attacked. Saudi wasn't attacked. So it's only left Bahrain and Kuwait. And then Israeli media started claiming that Bahrain and Kuwait were behind the attack. And then, so that's what everyone was speculating. Bahrain and Kuwait was trying to create deterrence by striking Iran, saying, look, this is between the EU and the US. Stop striking US bases in our country. And then in the last few minutes, as you were coming on, Iranian media started denying the reports, saying, no, the reports of explosions in all these cities we reported in the last hour are all untrue. So I don't know. I told you it's going to be confusing. I don't know whether the Gulf did attack Iran, some Gulf countries, maybe Kuwait, Bahrain, and Iran didn't want to escalate, so they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I don't know whether the air defenses were active or maybe anti-ship missiles launched from Iran, but there's no reports of that. But air defenses were active, and the Iranian media jumped to conclusions because everyone's on edge. So I don't really have anything conclusive for you, Colonel, that we can go off, but except these scattered information from different sources. But maybe I can start with this question. Would you be surprised if any Gulf country participated in an attack on Iran today?
Absolutely. Very definitely. The only thing that sprung to my mind, it seems like a remote possibility, but that an Israeli strike was flown from a position along the Gulf. You know, that's not impossible, but it doesn't sound as though we have any real clarity, and there's confusion as to whether or not anything really happened. So, you know, but the last thing I would do if I were in Qatar right now or Bahrain is launch a strike against Iran. What's to stop Iran from flattening the place? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I agree, especially Bahrain, tiny little Bahrain or Kuwait. I would be surprised if Qatar participated in it because Qatar was not struck by Iran, except it seems one strike yesterday, one missile, more of a warning shot. There was one new report, this came in now, according to Iranian media, Iranian military headquarters on the outskirts of Bushir was hit by a projectile from the American Zionist enemy, according to IRNA, so Iranian media, citing the deputy political and security governor of Bushir. The deputy says the attack resulted in no casualties. So that might have been, so that might have been a very, the air defenses, etc., and everyone's on edge responding to that little attack. But I would agree with you as well. I understand Bahrain and Kuwait would want to maybe consider building deterrence, but they're too small to build deterrence, like a chihuahua barking at a lion.
Exactly. Doesn't make any sense. I also don't know what to make of the word projectile. What is this, a lawn dart, thrown from a ship or something? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. But, these things happen in war. When I was in 91, this is actually before we had begun the offensive on the ground. We had some soldiers, troops that were very far forward, right on the border with Saudi Arabia. And of course, you have to understand that these soldiers had never seen combat. They were all green at this point. So everything was fascinating and interesting and scary. And we got this report. I was awakened at, I think, something like 2 a.m. Sir, we have a report that so-and-so in G Troop is under bombardment. So I got up. I said, all right, let's go there and find out. Walked over to the Tactical Operations Center, this vehicle that we'd set up. I walked in there and said, what's going on? They said, well, this so-and-so reports such and such. I said, did this come through the exec? No. Who the hell sent this report in? So get them on the phone. So who's sending this report up and what do they say? They said, the report they said, sir, where we have air-to-ground bombs at our location. What the hell else are there other than air-to-ground bombs? I mean, do we have anti-gravity bombs and people are throwing things into the air? So this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So then I said, wait a minute, get somebody else over there. Go up there, find out what the hell's going on, call me back. Well, it turned out they were watching A-10s that were flying over us. We had an A-10 squadron that ultimately flew over us for much of our offensive. And as they were pulling out, they were engaged by some anti-aircraft weapons or missiles. And so they had chaff that came out that looked like fireworks, and the chaff was designed to divert the missile. But these soldiers had never seen that before, and so they were convinced the chaff was meant for them and that they were under attack. So, anything is possible in war. And the first reports you get is always wrong. Just remember that.
Especially with so many parties involved in this war. You've got, remember, we had the reports earlier of Saudi and the UAE attacking Iran during the war. You've got Iran striking the Gulf. You've got the US and Iran being the two main players. You've got Israel jumping in whenever necessary. Then you've got the Houthis that might pop in here and there. So there is a lot of parties involved in this war. It makes it very confusing.
How about those Balukis?
Yeah, exactly. You saw the strike. Did you see the strike on the railway yesterday? Have you had a chance to look at that?
You're talking about the one that connects to the Chinese and the Russians?
Yeah, the one next to the Turkmenistani border.
Yeah, and
that's interesting.
To me, that's very significant. That's worth
exactly.
talking.
Exactly. Well, I did save it to mention it to you. So the U.S. truck hit the Akteke Khan railway bridge in Golestan. So that's a bridge. It's the node connecting Xi'an to Tehran, so Xi'an in China, in 10 to 15 days overland. China's Belt and Road running straight through Iran. So it's Lisa, if you can, Stephanie now, the producer. Stephanie, I don't know if you can find the images. Lisa had them earlier to show them for the audience. But that was a railway line in Akala that, very close to Turkmenistan. But I don't know where it was attacked from. And also the damage is not that significant. So it seems more of a warning shot by the Americans. But it's interesting. It's very different to everything else we've seen. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Well, it's interesting to see the photographs. I did not have the photographs when I received the report, and the report said that they thought they would have this repaired in 24 hours. Now, maybe that's possible, but looking at the damage, it looks like it may take a little longer than that. And this, of course, also highlights something else, that the Belt and Road, which is enormously important to everybody in Eurasia, is new, and not all of the rail lines are completed, and there has been some discussion and debate about where you can send the rail lines. The Chinese would like to have sent rail lines down through Pakistan in greater numbers and greater volume. That hasn't happened because the Chinese are not confident of security along the railways. Now, that may change, but this one is important because it tells me that someone in Washington said, well, we'll do some damage to this and try to signal that we can isolate Iran. And also as a message to the Chinese, since we tend to treat the Belt and Road as a threat to us. I don't subscribe to that view, but then again, I'm not a China threat hawk. But I see the Belt and Road as the alternative to the United States Navy, which does represent a serious threat to China. We can shut down the whole Chinese coastline with our submarine fleet. Chinese know that. They've been through this before. Remember the Imperial Japanese Navy, before the Imperial Japanese Navy, the Royal Navy. So they don't want to be cut off. And so it becomes very important to build these overland routes. Now, as you can see from what you're showing up there right now, this is not going to change the game fundamentally. They'll repair the railway, and I think you'll see redundant railways show up in the near future. There are other ways to get into Iran as well across the Caspian. So it's not a strategic game changer, but I think you're making a valid point. It's a pretty serious message. I don't think it's a smart thing to do. I don't think it's going to change anything of consequence. But I think that there are people in the White House that probably thought in those terms. We've been down this road before. Well, hit so-and-so out there. That'll signal to them. We did this sort of thing in Vietnam with China. We did it during the Korean War along the border with China. It didn't make any difference.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I looked at it as a warning, but I'm like, warning of what exactly? Like, what does it really signal? Like one of my guests who's part of the Belt and Road Institute, and he's been studying this for decades. He was on earlier today for the first time on the show, and he was explaining to me how significant this is, how this is a threat to U.S. hegemony. And you've studied history and you always reference history, Colonel. He started referencing how the corridors that were being built, I think, from Russia to the Ottoman Empire were seen as a threat by the British Empire before World War One, and that played a role in what eventually led to World War One. So that shows the significance of this Belt and Road Initiative by China as a threat, or at least the U.S. would perceive it as a threat to the hegemony and the hegemony in the region. And he mentioned a quote. He said this quote always stuck with him. A quote by Biden in 2022. He went to Saudi at the time in Riyadh in July 2022. So it's before October 7th. And he said during the Ukraine war, he said, "We will not leave a vacuum in this region, the Gulf, to be filled by Russia and China." So that was a statement that Biden made. So he referenced that statement as what this strike on the railway could include, as the Americans sending a warning to Iran and other countries part of the initiative. So that's some of my speculation, or his speculation.
Well, the railway that you referred to before the First World War was the Berlin to Baghdad railway.
Yeah.
And that was taken as a threat by the British Empire, who wanted a monopoly of control over the sea lanes. And they also didn't want oil and anything else, for that matter, of significance transported overland. They wanted to make sure that whatever was moved out of the Middle East, particularly or with oil, would be at the mercy of the Royal Navy. And the Kaiser, who wasted a lot of money trying to build a German surface fleet, did have some strategic thinkers. And they said, look, we don't need a big fleet. We don't need, frankly, Bismarck was always opposed to colonies. So the Berlin to Baghdad railway came up. And that, of course, ran through the Ottoman Empire, of which Baghdad and Iraq, most of northern Iraq, well, in fact, all of Iraq was part of the Ottoman Empire at that stage. This time around, I don't think it's quite that significant. And I think there are people in Washington, as I said before, who are hopeful that this will be significant. In other words, they hope this frightens the Chinese or the Russians or something. It won't. It won't make any damn difference at all. We don't live in 1910. We're in a very different world today. And you have all of these countries and states across Central Asia who have an interest in participating in this Belt and Road project. They all stand to profit in some way. It's kind of an annoyance for the Chinese. We could do it much more easily across North America because we all speak the same language. We all have one law from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I wish we would do something similar to what the Chinese have done in Eurasia on the North American continent. I've written about that. I published about that. It's on my website. People can see it. It's called the Golden Spike Program. And it basically goes back to our railroad connectivity across the continent. So bottom line is, yes, that was the one strike that popped out when I looked at the list as being significant. I know, no doubt they'll repair it. It's not going to dampen Chinese enthusiasm for supporting Iran. Come on, wake up. They have a very good relationship with the Iranians on the basis of petroleum and a number of other products. So do the Indians. So the notion that you're going to do something like this, and this is going to warn everybody that things can get worse, it's not going to help our position at all. But there are some, we have a sort of late 20th century military establishment, and we have an early 20th century thinking establishment, if you want to dignify it with that word, in Washington, D.C. That's our problem.
Yeah, and also it could be, there might be some intelligence that we obviously don't know about. Maybe the Americans know some air defense batteries are being delivered through that railway in the next couple of days or on their way, and they struck it as a warning for the Chinese or for Iran not to import them. I'm just saying there could be more to it as well than something.
Most of the air and missile defense capability and radars and so forth, even missiles themselves, have been flown in by the Chinese.
Okay.
Massive, a very important airlift on a scale of only something that we historically have been able to do. Chinese can do it now. So, the bottom line is somebody's trying to say something about the Chinese or to the Chinese in connection with Iran. We got that. It's not going to change anything. That's my point.
Yeah. Since we're talking about the strikes, and there's no information on the strikes today, everything's quiet now on the explosions we heard earlier. It's just very bizarre, very, very bizarre. I'm sure we'll get reports of it. Similar to the attacks by Saudi and the UAE, we only got reports about it weeks later after the ceasefire. We'll probably hear about this in a few days. We'll start hearing leaks come out. But I haven't asked you yet your thoughts on the escalations in the last 48 hours. So you had Iran attack those 3 ships going through the Omani side, and the US just went ballistic. They've attacked in the last 2 days. It was 14 times the level of attacks we saw the last 2 times. They retaliated against the strikes on the ships going through the Omani side. So the Iranian strikes beforehand in the last couple of weeks. So it's significantly more, according to the New York Times, about 14 times more. There's kind of 2 schools of thought here. One of them is the ceasefire dead, or the MOU is dead, as Trump has said, and this is the beginning of a continuation of the war. And the other one, which I'm in that camp, at least for now, is that this is just the 2 sides, a bit of a power struggle between the both. Iran saying we're going to control the Strait of Hormuz, and the US trying to break that, trying everything they can to break that. And the Iranians' retaliation kind of confirms that, because they're not escalating. They're like, we're going to strike Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan and keep our control of the Strait of Hormuz. And today, the ships are going through the Iranian side. So they seem to be playing the long game there. What's your analysis of this escalation, and how worrying is it?
I think perhaps the first observation is that Iran has gone to a full war footing. In other words, they are now mobilized for war, total war against us. Are we mobilized for total war against them? No. We have a fraction of our military capability. Now, most of the fleet is currently involved in this. And there's something interesting that should be brought up, and that is that the United States Navy has now officially admitted that they have more launchers and more launch tubes for missiles than they have missiles to fire. So what are we doing? I don't know, but I suspect that we're pulling assets, missiles, from other locations, other theaters, and concentrating them in the Indian Ocean and potentially the Mediterranean. But I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Iran is in a total war mode, full war